All right, strap in for a deep dive into a topic that's a little bit, well, creepy to say the least. We're going to be talking about dead peasants insurance.
Ooh, yeah, that's a pretty evocative name.
It is, and it's pretty accurate too when you get down to it. We're talking about companies basically profiting off the deaths of their employees.
Yeah, through life insurance policies, essentially.
Right, exactly. And you might be surprised to learn that a certain very big retailer that we all know, Walmart, was deeply involved in this.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how did this even come about? I mean, how is that even legal?
Right. Well, so it all started back in 1974 with the Employee Retirement Income Security Act, or ERISA.
Okay, Arisa.
ERISA. This was a law designed to protect employees' benefits, like pensions and health insurance. But it actually ended up paving the way for this unsettling practice.
So a law designed to protect employees ended up being a loophole for companies to make money off of their deaths.
Yeah, well, the initial idea behind these policies was that companies could use them to cover the costs of hiring and training replacements if an employee passed away.
Okay.
Yeah, sounds reasonable on the surface.
Sure. I mean, losing an employee is expensive.
Exactly. But like a lot of things in the financial world, this seemingly benign idea, um, well, it took a dark turn.
Okay, so how did this dead peasants insurance thing really get going? Were they just insuring like the CEOs and executives?
No, not at all. What happened is that companies started taking out these corporate-owned life insurance policies, or COA policies, on a massive scale.
Okay.
And it wasn't just the top executives, they were insuring everyday employees.
Hmm.
Cashiers, stock clerks, janitors, you name it. And often they were doing it without the employees even knowing.
Without their knowledge. So
Mhm.
you could be working at a store making minimum wage,
Hmm.
completely unaware that your company is essentially betting on you dying.
Exactly.
That's messed up.
Yeah. And Walmart was right in the thick of it.
They were.
Oh, yeah. Walmart held over 350,000 COALA policies on its employees.
Wow.
They were making money off the deaths of the very people stocking the shelves and ringing up your purchases.
So how did this even become legal? Like, how was this allowed to happen?
Well, it wasn't so much about it being explicitly legal as it was about taking advantage of, a gray area in the law. And remember ERISA,
Right.
that well-intentioned law we talked about. It accidentally created a loophole that let companies take out these policies without the employee's knowledge or consent.
So basically, a loophole that put profits over, basic human decency. But people fought back against this,
Oh,
right?
absolutely. There was a ton of pushback, both from the public and from lawmakers.
Yeah.
The big turning point was in 2006 with the Pension Protection Act. This law made it mandatory for companies to get informed consent from employees before taking out a life insurance policy on them.
Good.
It also limited the tax benefits companies could get from these policies, making them less financially appealing.
Okay, so that's a step in the right direction for sure. But hold on, does this mean that companies can't profit from their employees' deaths anymore? Is dead peasants insurance like a thing of the past?
Well, it's not quite that simple.
Okay, so companies can still profit off of their employees' deaths today, even with these new regulations in place.
Well, that's what we're going to talk about in the next part of our deep dive. We'll look at all the nuances of these current regulations and tackle the ethical questions that come up even when you have, consent involved.
Okay, so we're back and still trying to wrap our heads around this whole dead peasants insurance thing. Even with these new laws, it sounds like companies can still potentially profit from their employees dying. I mean, is that even ethical? Even if everyone agrees to it?
Well, that's a really tough question. I mean, informed consent is a complicated concept, especially when you're talking about the relationship between an employer and an employee.
What do you mean by that?
Well, you've got an employee who might be worried about losing their job, and then their boss, who has all the power, asks them to sign a paper that says the company will benefit if they die.
Yeah, that doesn't sound like a very fair situation.
Right. I mean, even if no one's directly pressuring them, it's still hard to say no to your boss without worrying about the consequences.
Yeah, that makes sense. And plus, do employees really understand these policies? Those legal documents can be really confusing.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, do they really get that the company, not their family, is the one who benefits? Do they understand the fine print?
So even if a company says they got consent, is it really informed consent?
Yeah, that's the gray area. Real informed consent needs more than just a signature on a form. There has to be transparency. Everything needs to be explained clearly. The company has to make sure the employee really understands what they're agreeing to.
And that's where things get even trickier, right?
Because let's say a company really does go above and beyond. explains everything perfectly, answers every question. There's no pressure at all. Even then, there are still ethical concerns.
I see what you mean. Even if the consent part is 100% clear, is it right for a company to profit from an employee's death?
Yeah, I mean, think about it. If a company profits when an employee dies, doesn't that create a weird atmosphere at work? Does it make people distrustful?
I can see that. It doesn't exactly create a sense of teamwork or community.
Exactly. And these are questions that every company needs to think about.
And it goes beyond just one company, right? Like, what does it say about us as a society if we're okay with profiting from death, even if it's legal?
Right. It kind of makes you wonder, are we saying that a person's life is just something you can buy and sell?
It's a pretty disturbing thought.
Mm.
So this isn't just about legal loopholes or greedy corporations. It's about our values. It's about how much we value human life.
Yeah. And this whole debate over these COLI policies really shows you how messy things get when you're talking about the law, ethics, and what society thinks is right.
Yeah, what's legal and what's right aren't always the same thing. And what we think is right can change over time too. So what now? Where do we go from here?
Well, in the last part of our deep dive, we'll look at where things stand today, and we'll talk about what might happen to these COLI policies in the future.
Okay, so we've talked about the history of this dead peasants insurance and how messed up the ethics are. But what about the future? Like, where do things go from here?
That's the big question, isn't it? I mean, it's hard to predict the future, but one thing that could have a big impact is this idea of corporate social responsibility.
Okay, corporate social responsibility.
Yeah, people are starting to pay more attention to how companies behave. They're holding them accountable for, doing the right thing.
So even if it's legal for a company to take out one of these policies, they might not do it because they're afraid of what people will think.
Exactly. I mean, with social media and everything, a company's reputation can be ruined overnight. No CEO wants to be known as, the guy who profits from his employee's death.
Right. Even if they technically didn't do anything wrong.
Exactly.
Okay, so public opinion is one factor. What else? Are there other things that could affect these COL policies?
Well, the nature of work is changing too. We've got the gig economy, more freelancers, more people working for themselves.
Right.
It's not your typical 9-to-5 job anymore.
So would a company even take out a policy on a freelancer? I mean, someone they're only working with for a short time?
It's unlikely. I mean, the whole idea of a company benefiting financially from someone's death, it kind of assumes that you have this, traditional employer-employee relationship.
Which is becoming less and less common.
Exactly.
So it's possible that these dead peasants insurance policies, they might just sort of fade away as the way we work changes. Not because of new laws, but just because they won't make sense anymore.
It's definitely possible. I mean, think about it. What was acceptable a few decades ago might be completely unthinkable today.
That's true. Well, this has been quite a deep dive. We started with this, well, kind of creepy idea of dead peasants insurance. We talked about the history, the loopholes, the ethics, and how things might change in the future.
It really makes you think about the relationship between business, doing what's right, and how we value human life.
Absolutely. This isn't just some abstract thing we're talking
Yeah.
about. It's about real people and the choices we make as a society. So as we wrap things up, I want to leave you with some questions to think about. Where do we draw the line between making money and, taking advantage of people? Can you ever really have informed consent when one person has all the power? And what kind of world do we want to live in? One where profits are all that matters, or one where we respect everyone's life? These are big questions, but they're important ones. And hopefully this deep dive has given you some food for thought. Thanks for listening.